My brother left me in charge of our family home, but now he's back, claiming it's his right to take it over after ignoring our parents for years. Growing up, my brother, Dave, was always the favorite. He was the classic older sibling, the golden child, the one my parents never had to worry about. Dave excelled in everything: grades, sports, friends. Meanwhile, I was the quiet kid, the responsible one, the one who stayed close to home while Dave went off, living his life. And honestly, that was fine. We both had our own paths, and I never resented him for being the one who made it. But when my parents started getting older, things changed. Suddenly, it wasn't about who was the smartest or the most successful, it was about who was there, day in and day out. And that person was me. After Dad had his first stroke a few years ago, I became the go-to for everything they needed. Doctor appointments, grocery runs, fixing things around the house, they relied on me for all of it. Mom used to call Dave, and he'd promise to visit, to come back soon, but there was always some excuse. He was busy with work, his kids, his life. After a while, I stopped expecting him to show up. It was easier to accept that I'd be handling things alone than to keep waiting for someone who'd never arrive. When Dad passed, things only got harder. Mom's health declined quickly afterward, and I was the one there, holding her hand through the hospital visits, making sure she took her meds, sitting by her side until the end. Dave flew in for the funeral, of course. He made a big show of grieving, talking about how he wished he'd been around more, but in my mind, it was too little, too late. By then, I was exhausted, emotionally drained. I'd lost both of them within 2 years, and there I was, left to pick up the pieces. One of the last things Mom said to me was, "Take care of the house, Jake. It's yours now." It was the house where we'd both grown up, filled with decades of memories, good and bad. For a while, I thought about selling it, moving somewhere new to start fresh. But in the end, I couldn't bring myself to let it go. It was all I had left of them. So, I stayed. I fixed the leaky roof, replaced the creaky floorboards, even planted a little garden in the backyard. It wasn't easy, between balancing work and managing the house, I was stretched thin. But somehow, it gave me a sense of purpose. Taking care of the house felt like a way to honor my parents, to keep their memory alive. Dave, of course, never asked about it. For him, it was like the house didn't exist anymore. That is, until last month. Out of the blue, Dave called me. I remember picking up the phone, surprised to see his name on the screen. It had been almost a year since we'd last spoken, and I figured it'd be a quick chat. But he didn't call to check in on me or catch up. No, he wanted to talk about the family home. He sounded different, almost entitled, as if he'd been waiting for the right moment to bring this up. He told me he was thinking of moving back to our hometown. Said he wanted to get back to his roots and thought it'd be a good idea if he took over the house. I was floored. Here I was, the one who'd taken care of everything, who'd been there through all the tough times, and now Dave wanted to swoop back in and act like it was his right to reclaim the house. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. I asked him what he meant by take over, and he started talking about how we should both benefit from the property. He didn't even acknowledge that I'd been the one maintaining it all this time. It was like he thought the house was just sitting there, untouched, waiting for him. I tried to explain that I was living here, that I'd put my own money and effort into keeping it up. But he brushed it off, saying he was willing to buy me out or let me rent a room from him. The arrogance in his tone made my blood boil. Ever since that call, I haven't been able to think about anything else. I've had countless sleepless nights, going over all the times he left us hanging, how he only shows up when it's convenient for him. I thought I was past caring about his selfishness, but now it feels like he's ripping open old wounds. Every memory of him not being there, of me carrying the weight alone, has come rushing back. And the worst part? A small part of me still feels guilty, like maybe he's right, that I don't have the right to hold on to the house alone. Friends tell me I should stand my ground, that I've earned the right to keep it. But Dave's got this way of making me feel like the bad guy. I keep questioning myself, wondering if I'm being selfish or if I'm just tired of being walked over. It's hard not to feel like that little brother again, always one step behind, always looking for his approval. But I'm not a kid anymore, and this time I'm not sure I can just let him have his way. I've started avoiding his calls. I know it's immature, but I don't have it in me to deal with him right now. He left a voicemail yesterday, saying something about legal options, which threw me into a panic. I don't know if he's bluffing, trying to scare me into agreeing, but the thought of dragging this into a legal battle is more than I can handle. This is the house where our parents lived, where we grew up. The idea of turning it into some courtroom drama feels wrong. But what choice do I have if he keeps pushing? I don't know what's coming next. Part of me wants to confront him, to lay it all out and tell him he lost his right to the house when he abandoned our parents. But another part of me wonders if that would only make things worse. Maybe I'm just prolonging the inevitable, clinging to something that was never really mine. I wish my parents were still here. I wish I didn't have to make this decision alone. Update 1. Thank you all for your comments and advice. It's been comforting to know I'm not the only one who feels this way, and hearing your perspectives has made me feel less alone in this mess. A lot of you suggested I consult a lawyer to protect my rights, and honestly, I think you're right. I've been trying to avoid taking that step, but I can't ignore the reality of this situation anymore. Dave has been relentless, calling me every few days with new suggestions for what we should do. It's clear he's not letting this go, and the constant pressure is starting to wear me down. I told him I needed time to think, hoping he'd back off, but instead, he just took it as an opportunity to press harder. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with a lawyer to discuss my options. I don't know what the outcome will be, but I need to protect what my parents left behind. This house isn't just a piece of property to me, it's a connection to them, a reminder of everything they sacrificed. If Dave wants to take that away, he'll have to fight for it. Meeting with the lawyer was surreal. I'd never thought of myself as someone who'd need legal advice against my own brother, but here we are. The lawyer, Mrs. Grant, was straightforward, which I appreciated. She explained that since our parents didn't leave a formal will, the property technically belongs to both of us. I felt a wave of frustration at that, everything I've put into this house, every repair, every memory, and yet Dave still has a legal claim. But Mrs. Grant told me that with enough proof of my investments and the years I've spent caring for our parents, I might be able to negotiate an agreement. The irony is, I never thought I'd have to negotiate my right to stay in my own home. I told Mrs. Grant that the house wasn't just some asset to me, it was my connection to Mom and Dad. I was the one who sat by their side, who carried out their last wishes, and it feels wrong to have to justify that. But she gently reminded me that emotions don't count much in court. It's hard to accept that, though. To me, this house is a part of my parents, a part of who I am. For Dave, it's just another opportunity. I'd hoped seeing a lawyer would give me some peace of mind, but if anything, it's made me more anxious. Dave's messages have become more frequent, and they're starting to sound less like requests and more like demands. He's gone from "it would be good for us both" to "I have a right to this just as much as you do." I can practically hear his entitled tone through the phone, as if he's convinced he's doing me a favor by letting me stay in the house at all. This morning, I got another voicemail from him, and it was the worst one yet. He started off by telling me I was being unreasonable and selfish, that Mom and Dad wouldn't have wanted this. That last line hit me harder than I expected. It's like he's trying to twist their memory, using them as leverage against me. I can't believe he'd go there. I always knew we had our differences, but using our parents' legacy to guilt-trip me into handing over the house? That's low, even for him. I've been trying to avoid thinking about the past, but it's like every call from Dave brings it all back, the resentment, the sense of abandonment. I remember the way Mom would look at the door, hoping he'd come through, and the way Dad would brush it off, saying, "He's just busy." And now, after ignoring us for so long, he wants to come back and take over as if nothing happened. The anger I feel is almost physical, like this heavy weight in my chest that won't go away. To make things worse, Dave's been talking to other family members about the situation. I've had cousins calling me, saying they heard I'm being difficult, that family should stick together. It's infuriating. None of them were around when Mom was in the hospital, or when Dad needed constant care. They didn't see the reality of those last years. They only know Dave's version of events, and he's good at spinning things in his favor. I feel like I'm fighting a losing battle, not just with Dave, but with the whole family. I tried talking to a close friend about it, hoping for some perspective. She told me to keep pushing back, to remember that I've earned the right to be here. But it's hard not to feel like the bad guy when my own brother is saying I'm being unfair. Part of me wonders if I should just let him have it, walk away, and start fresh somewhere else. But then I look around this house, the photos, the little mementos of my parents, and I know I can't just let it go. This is where I grew up, where I said goodbye to the people who raised me. I can't walk away from that. I don't know what Dave's endgame is, but it's clear he won't stop until he gets what he wants. I'm not even sure if he cares about the house or if he's just doing this to prove a point. Maybe he feels guilty for not being around, and this is his twisted way of trying to make up for it. But whatever his reasons, he's turning my life upside down, and I'm not sure how much more I can take. Update 2. Thanks to everyone who commented on my last post. Your support and advice mean more than I can say. A lot of you recommended that I gather as much proof as possible of my investments in the house, and I'm doing exactly that. I spent the past few days going through receipts, bank statements, anything that shows the money I've put into this place over the years. I confronted Dave last night. I told him that if he really wants to push this, he should know I'm ready to fight. For once, he seemed taken aback, like he didn't expect me to stand up for myself. He tried to brush it off, saying he just wants what's fair. But when I asked him where he was during all the hard times, he didn't have an answer. Right now, it feels like I'm in this constant battle, but I'm not backing down. This house isn't just a property, it's the last piece of my parents' legacy. If he wants to take that away, he'll have to go through me. The past few weeks have been brutal. Every time I think this can't get worse, Dave finds a way to push me further. The lawyer advised me to keep everything documented, so now I'm basically living with a paper trail. Every call, every voicemail, every email, I'm saving it all. It feels ridiculous, like I'm gearing up for some kind of war against my own brother, but I don't see any other option. He's made it clear that he's not backing down, and I can't let him bulldoze over everything I've worked for. One of the hardest parts has been dealing with the family's reactions. Dave's been working overtime to paint me as the unreasonable one. He's talked to our cousins, a few aunts and uncles, and now even my godmother has reached out, saying she's concerned about me. It's like he's gathering allies, trying to turn everyone against me so I'll cave under the pressure. I've had countless phone calls where I've had to explain myself, defending my choices to people who weren't there, who have no idea what those last few years were really like. And each time, it's exhausting. Last weekend, Dave actually showed up at the house unannounced. I wasn't prepared to see him, and I'll admit, I froze when I saw him standing on the front porch, his arms crossed like he was staking his claim. He had that smug, self-assured look, like he already knew how this was going to play out. He said he was just in town and thought he'd stop by, but I knew better. This was a power move, his way of reminding me that he could show up whenever he pleased. We talked, or argued, really, right there on the porch. He accused me of hoarding the family property, acting like I was entitled to it just because I'd been the one taking care of it. I tried to explain that this wasn't about entitlement, it was about respect, about honoring Mom and Dad's wishes. But he just laughed, dismissing my words like they meant nothing. In that moment, something snapped. I told him I was done, that if he wanted to take this to court, I'd be ready. The words came out before I even realized what I was saying, but I didn't regret them. For the first time, I wasn't just on the defensive. I was ready to fight back. Dave didn't take it well. He launched into this rant about how I've always been jealous of him, how I've never respected his success. It was like he couldn't see the reality that this had nothing to do with jealousy. I was fighting for the memories, for the life our parents had built, not for some misplaced grudge. But in his mind, this was all about him, as usual. After he left, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. I was furious at his arrogance, at how easily he dismissed everything I'd done for our parents, but I was also relieved that I'd finally said what I'd been holding back. I was no longer just waiting for his next move, I was taking control of my own story. That night, I got a call from my aunt, the one who's always been closest to Dave. She's heard his side, of course, but she's also been supportive of me. She told me that family feuds can leave scars, that once you cross certain lines, there's no going back. It's hard to hear that, but I know she's right. I'm at a crossroads where I either give in to Dave's demands or I keep fighting, knowing that it might destroy any chance of reconciliation. But at this point, I don't think reconciliation is possible. He's made it clear that he's willing to tear apart our parents' legacy for his own gain, and I can't let that stand. I've started to think about what happens if I lose. The lawyer's been honest with me, there's no guarantee I'll win, and if Dave keeps pushing, we could end up in a drawn-out legal battle that drains us both. I'm trying to prepare myself for that reality, but it's hard to imagine walking away from this house, this life, because of him. It feels like a betrayal, like I'd be letting down my parents' memory if I gave up now. Every night, I go through the same questions. Am I doing the right thing? Should I just let it go, find peace somewhere else? But I can't shake the feeling that if I give up, I'll never forgive myself. This isn't just a house, it's the last piece of my parents, a symbol of everything they stood for. And I won't let him take that away. Update 3. Thanks again to everyone who's been following this journey with me. Your words have kept me grounded when I felt like I was losing my mind. I wanted to give you all an update on where things stand. After our last confrontation, Dave sent me a formal letter through his lawyer, outlining his claim to the house. Seeing it in writing hit harder than I expected. This isn't just a family argument anymore, it's a legal dispute. I showed the letter to my own lawyer, and she says I have a strong case based on the years I've put into maintaining the property. But it's clear that this is going to be a fight. I'm drained, emotionally and financially. Part of me wonders if it's worth it, but then I remember everything my parents sacrificed, how much they gave so we'd have a home to come back to. This house is my way of honoring them, of holding on to the legacy they left behind. I don't know how this will end, but I'm not backing down. Thank you all for being here through this. The past few days have been a blur. Ever since Dave escalated things with that letter from his lawyer, I've felt like I'm living in someone else's life. I never imagined my own brother would take things this far, but here we are. Mrs. Grant, my lawyer, told me to prepare for a worst-case scenario in which we might actually go to court. The thought of sitting across from Dave in a courtroom, arguing over our parents' legacy, feels surreal. It's as if this has turned into a power struggle, a game he's determined to win at any cost. I confronted Dave directly after getting the letter, knowing full well it might be a mistake. I needed to see if there was anything left of the brother I once knew, someone I could reason with. I went to his house, hoping we could talk things out face to face. When he opened the door, he looked almost smug, like he'd been expecting me to come crawling. I could feel my anger bubbling up, but I tried to keep calm. I told him how hurtful this whole process had been, how it felt like he was betraying everything our parents stood for. His response? It's just a house, Jake. You're the one making this personal. The way he said it, so detached, like the house was nothing more than a transaction, sent a shiver down my spine. I realized then that he really doesn't get it, or worse, he just doesn't care. I told him that the house meant everything to me, that it was more than just walls and a roof. But he shrugged, saying, "You're too sentimental. It's just business, Jake." I could feel my control slipping. Here was my own brother, who'd been absent for most of our parents' final years, telling me that I was too sentimental for holding on to the one thing they left behind. I wanted to scream at him, to shake him and make him understand what this house means, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. He'd already made up his mind. The conversation went downhill from there. He accused me of trying to keep him out of his rightful inheritance and told me that he was willing to buy me out for a fair price. He even had the nerve to suggest that I could use the money to get my own place. Hearing him talk like that, so cold and calculated, made me feel like I was nothing to him. This wasn't just a house, it was our home, our family's memories, and he was treating it like a real estate deal. After that conversation, I knew we were past the point of no return. There's no fixing this, no going back. Dave has shown me who he is, and it's not the brother I grew up with. It's someone I don't recognize, someone who sees our parents' legacy as just another asset. I walked away, feeling a strange mix of anger and sadness, knowing that I had just lost whatever was left of our relationship. Since then, I've been going through the house, gathering every document, every receipt, every piece of proof that I poured my life into this place. I'm fighting not just for the house, but for everything it represents, the years I spent caring for our parents, the sacrifices I made. I know Dave will never understand that, but it doesn't matter anymore. This is about honoring my parents' memory, about standing up for what's right. In the quiet moments, I wonder if it's worth it. I wonder if I'm being too stubborn, if I should just take the money and walk away. But then I remember the night sitting by my mother's side, the promises I made to her to take care of things, to keep the family together. This house is a part of that promise, a part of her legacy, and I can't just hand it over to someone who sees it as nothing more than a piece of property. I feel like I'm at war, not just with Dave, but with myself. Part of me wants to hold on to the memories, to keep fighting, but another part of me is so tired, so worn out from this endless conflict. My friends say I'm doing the right thing, that I'm standing up for what matters, but some days, I feel like I'm just clinging to the past. I don't know if I'm making the right choice, but at this point, I don't know how to let go. I haven't been sleeping much. Every time I close my eyes, I see that empty house, the ghost of our family life fading into nothing. I can't shake the feeling that if I lose this house, I'll lose everything that connected me to my parents, to the life we once had. And that's a loss I don't know if I can bear. Final update. It's been nearly a year since this all started, and looking back, it feels like a lifetime ago. I wish I could say everything turned out the way I hoped, but life doesn't work that way. The house, my parents' legacy, is no longer mine. After months of back and forth, escalating tension, and mounting legal fees, I realized that holding on to it was costing me more than I could bear, not just financially, but emotionally. The battles with Dave were exhausting, and at a certain point, I had to ask myself if this fight was truly honoring my parents or if I was simply punishing myself. I eventually agreed to a buyout. Dave ended up paying me less than I thought the house was worth, but honestly, by that point, I was too worn down to keep pushing. The money wasn't the point, anyway. The hardest part was letting go of the memories, of the life I'd built in that house, of everything it represented to me. But sometimes, closure isn't about winning, it's about accepting what's best for your own peace. The day I packed up and left was one of the strangest of my life. Walking through each room, seeing the marks my parents and I had left over the years, felt like I was saying goodbye to them all over again. I found myself lingering in each room, saying my goodbyes in silence. I even took a few things, my mom's favorite mug, my dad's old record player, a few family photos. I couldn't take everything, but those small pieces felt like enough. Since then, I've moved to a small apartment on the other side of town. It's quiet, peaceful, but it doesn't quite feel like home. I'm still adjusting, learning to live without the familiar comforts of my parents' house. Some days, I feel like a stranger in my own life, as if everything I knew has been taken away. But I'm learning to let go, to accept that some things aren't meant to last forever. Dave and I don't talk much anymore. After everything that happened, our relationship is fractured in a way I'm not sure can ever be repaired. It's strange, because he was my brother long before he became my rival. But I think he's content with his new life, with the house he fought so hard for. I hope, in some way, it brings him the peace he's looking for, even if it came at such a high cost. These days, I'm focusing on building a new life, one that isn't anchored to the past. I've kept up with therapy, and it's helped me understand the weight I'd been carrying all these years. I've realized that my attachment to the house was about more than just a physical space. It was about guilt, about feeling like I had to be the one to hold everything together after our parents were gone. But letting go of that house has also meant letting go of that burden. It doesn't mean I've forgotten them, it just means I'm learning to remember them in other ways. I've started volunteering at a community center, working with kids who don't have stable homes. It's given me a new purpose, a way to channel my energy towards something positive. I think my parents would be proud. They always taught me to give back, to be there for those who need it. In a strange way, I feel like I'm keeping their legacy alive, even without the house. Some nights, I still dream about the old place. I see the rooms, the furniture, the garden I planted in the backyard. It feels so real, like I'm right there, walking through the house again. But when I wake up, I feel a strange sense of peace. I know that I gave it everything I had, and even though things didn't turn out the way I wanted, I can live with that. I found a new kind of closure, one that's not tied to any one place or thing. Thank you to everyone who's followed along, who's given advice, and who's listened. Your support has meant more than I can say, especially on those nights when I felt completely alone. I've learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who show up, who stand by you when things get hard. In a way, this experience has helped me find a new kind of family, one that's made up of friends, of strangers who offered their kindness, and of people who understood what I was going through. So, this is me, moving forward. I'm letting go of the past, of the weight I'd been carrying for so long. I'll always miss the old house, but I'm finally ready to start a new chapter. And maybe that's the best way to honor my parents, to live a life they'd be proud of, even if it looks different than what I'd imagined. Thank you all, truly, for being there. This isn't the ending I wanted, but it's the one I've made peace with. And I think, in the end, that's what really matters.